If you put out one album and just promoted the F out of it for 10 years, it would be a lot better to me than you putting out 10 albums and promoting each one for 1 year.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. This is the podcast where we cover growing and monetizing a fan base and building a music career with marketing strategies that are working right now based on what we see every single day at our music marketing agency and across our community of thousands of artists and bands. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. This is episode 382, and I'm your host, Jack McCarthy, and with me, as always, is Circa. Circa, what's up, dude?
Not a lot, friend. What is up with you?
Man, it is a beautiful day. I'm excited to be here with you and to talk about stacking up your release cycle. I want to lead with a question that a lot of artists have asked me and have asked us over the years, and that is, should I focus most of my marketing leading up to my releases or my launches or after? And I think there are a few approaches to answering this question, and I'm excited to dive into it with you today.
Yes, I'm gassed.
I'm super excited. The conventional wisdom for marketing a release, right, in music is do a lot of stuff leading up to the release, build a lot of hype, get your fans excited. That would be the answer to the question of what do I do first, right? What do I focus most of my efforts on in my marketing? Is it before my release? The answer in that vein would be yes, before your release. Oftentimes on this podcast, and generally speaking in what we teach and do at Entrepreneurs, we talk a lot about post-marketing. That answer would be no, you should probably focus a lot more of your effort, or at least an equal amount of your effort, on the post-marketing portion. And that's the second vein of this answer. However, I think the truth in reality, especially like over years of experiencing different types of artist launch campaigns and release cycles and things like that, is the reality is it's both. It's both things. And today we wanted to talk about that concept and also tactics that you can apply sort of throughout a release cycle, both leading up to a release, before it happens, and in the post-marketing phase to make your launches more successful. So I want to lead with that. And now I want to ask you, Cirque, what is your take on my both and analysis of this question?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, oftentimes I think we come across as being anti-pre-marketing, and I could totally understand why that might be the case, because I kind of like am not nice to like the concepts of pre-marketing most often.
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily like pre-marketing in general that I'm not a fan of. I'm just not a fan of the concept of getting people all hyped up for something that they can't do right now.
Yeah.
And there are tons of examples of types of pre-marketing that don't require you to sort of leave people high and dry, like get them all excited for some far future event, make them wait, like build anticipation. Like maybe there was a time at which you could build anticipation for something and people would wait, because like everything in their life was like that. You order a product over the phone and you have to wait for it to come. You want to go get something, you have to wait by driving there and sitting through all this stuff. You want to see a movie but don't want to go to the theater. Well, you got to wait for it to come out. Like, there was a lot more waiting in society before, and so it's like more understandable. But now, like, I don't have to wait for anything, dude. I ordered something on Amazon this morning. It's here by 2 p.m. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not waiting for your thing. I'm not anticipating it. In fact, like, I'm going to ignore it and not pay attention to it if I have to wait. So it's less like, it's more like the delayed gratification impetus that people put on their audience by like pre-marketing that I'm not a fan of.
Well, and this has become more and more, I'll use a big word here, I think that's become more and more insidious even in the last 5 years, where it's like, so much pre-marketing that artists do conventionally is like PreSave PreSave. And not only does that not do anything for the artist, really, we won't get into the specifics of how PreSave technology works, but it does literally nothing for the fans. It provides absolutely zero value to them to be pre-saving your thing. Nothing. And then even when the drop happens, it still does nothing. So much marketing gets put into that. And that's just, yeah, it's just not good. And that's probably like the ultimate evil version of building up hype for something that people can receive no immediate value from, in your example there.
Yeah. So it's that, you can totally like to give you an example, right? If we have a movie trilogy, necessarily movies 1 and 2 are pre-marketing for movie 3. That's fine. I got to see 2 movies while I was waiting for movie 3. So like there are forms of pre-marketing or building anticipation for something that don't require that you sort of sandbag your audience.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think historically speaking, at least as we've talked about music marketing over the years, we've really, at least from my perspective, like we focused a lot of attention on post marketing because music artists, the music industry over indexes so heavily on pre-marketing, right? So naturally we're like, okay, we need to tilt the scales in the other direction as much as possible, swing the pendulum in the post-marketing direction. But I think there's a lot to be said about the balance between these two things, because you can do a lot of really awesome damage in your music business in that pre-marketing stage, in building hype. And you can do that in ways that actually are valuable to your fans. You think about things like leading up to a release. You can very specifically market products or include bonuses in, let's say you're selling a vinyl, right? And you've got bonuses that are only going to be available until the day that the album actually comes out. And then after that, those bonuses go away, or they get switched out for some other kind of bonus, which, pro tip tactic right there. You don't have to take bonuses away. You can just change them. And then you still have something to go into post-marketing land with. We can get more into tactics like that in a little bit here. But these are the kind of things that I think you can do and be really heavily impactful towards your fans, give them something cool, build experiences for them so that they're kind of living in the moment with you experientially as you're moving towards your release. That was the big like inspiration point for me in talking about this today, is like you can build experiences for your fans that make it feel like they are getting ready with you for this milestone sort of moment, or this tentpole event in your career. But you can't do that with like weak ass marketing efforts like, please pre-save it. It really helps me with the Spotify algorithms. I see artists do that all the time where they're like, oh, please help us, fans. Please help us with the Spotify gods, where if you pre-save this, click this button, it does nothing for you, but it helps us. So please do it. It's like, why don't you just sell them something instead and save some kind of cool impact that they can have on you to be related to an impact that you can also have on them in terms of like the actual exchange that's going on here. I saw a band just the other day. I was scrolling on Sunday morning, actually. A band came up in my Instagram feed called Friend Circle. I've listened to them here and there. And I saw a post. They had a record that was, I think, dropping like the next day. And I saw a post and like it caught my attention because the caption on the video was like a big bright banner that said last call. And I was like, what's this? And I wasn't following them. This just showed up in my feed. It said last call. And then the text caption was like last call for pre-orders for the shirts for the new record. And so they were selling like a very specific shirt ahead of the album dropping. And they were going out to their fans and being like, this is it, last call. Like, we're only doing X number more of these. And I was like, this band gets it, dude. Like, they're building up hype ahead of the thing, ahead of the drop for something related to it, and not just another bullshit, like, valueless marketing angle towards their fans. Like, this is something that their people actually want. And it actually inspired this whole sort of brain dump here today, for me at least, because it was nice to see somebody attacking pre-marketing in a way that was actually impactful for both parties.
Yeah. It's, that's definitely a modality that I think is more useful for pre-marketing. I do want to double click on the point you said, which is that the industry over-indexes on pre-marketing. It's super important. It's incalculable, the damage that has been done by centralized entities in the music industry, making you, the artist, believe that of supreme importance is your first week's sales and the immediate reaction to something you do. And the only thing that you should be doing is putting all of your eggs in the building up anticipation basket, hoping that first week or that first month makes you famous.
Right. Yeah.
The incentives historically have been like, your record label, your manager, they're with you for a period of years. You're you forever. You're going to be you forever. And so your incentive has nothing to do with the first month or temporally local things. Record labels have tons of artists. They can only pay attention to artists in a given time frame all at once. So like they might be able to pay really close attention to 3 artists out of like 500 for 3 months out of 12 months in the year. And then they have to rotate because they have to distribute their bets. But you have one bet, it's you. And so you can stay there and market something for years and years beyond the point at which it becomes available. They can't. And so because they throw their weight around, they have the power in the room, or historically have, like, it's tricked artists into believing that this matters. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do in the first week. I don't care. Like, no one caring about your album the week it comes out tells me nothing about how successful it's going to be. It really tells me nothing. And more, like, we're breaking away from that model where that even matters. And so it's really important that you over-index on post-marketing, because what that has done psychologically to artists is not only cause them to think that matters and to pay close attention to pre-marketing, it's caused them to pay no attention to post-marketing.
That's true.
The most advantageous time for you to promote a product is when people can go buy it right now. So you now think that, 1, you have to pre-market the F out of everything you do. 2, if it flops in the first week or no one buys it, that means it's unsuccessful. And then 3, that it becomes old. That, after a certain period of time, you have to do something new because everyone will know that you're just promoting an old product. And it even feels weird, even to me, to promote something that's old, not because it is weird, not because there's any reason why anyone I'm promoting it to would know anything about when it came out or care, but because of this sort of historical, like, muscle memory that's been ingrained into us. And so it's really important that you, like, intentionally force yourself cognitively to shake loose of this notion that any of that matters. Like, you should be, if you put out one album and just promoted the F out of it for 10 years, it would be a lot better to me than you putting out 10 albums and promoting each one for 1 year.
I want to go a little deeper on this because I think you can envision this on a timeline that might be helpful, where in the center of a timeline, you have your release date, right? And this is where, to the left of that, it's where artists over-index on pre-release stuff. And then over here on the right side, it's the chasm after the release, where it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. And believe it or not, there are so many artists that once they get past that release date, they're like, well, now it's time. Now I tour. Like that's what they do.
Now I tour, and then while I'm touring, I write the next thing, and then I immediately record the next thing.
And you know what I don't do? I don't continue selling my record. I don't actively find new angles and new skin to put on the offers. And what I'm going to recommend here tactically that you do is think about the things that in that left side of the timeline or spectrum that excite you. Think about the special bundles that you put together, the bonuses that you might put on the vinyl or the CD or whatever it is you're selling, the merch that you might make. Think about those things, jump over the release date, and then think about those things again and be like, how could I put a fresh spin on these? And then how can I spin it out in new ways over time? Could I change the bonuses? Could I take one bonus from, side left and instead save it for side right? Could I create vinyl variants? Could I create different design work for t-shirts or for merch or whatever? Could I create seasonal merch around the record? All of these things you can do to build up as much of an arsenal for yourself for marketing your release after the drop date. And again, like, this isn't telling you to abandon pre-release marketing, but what it is saying is, like, recontextualize the stuff that excites you in the pre-release phase into the post-release phase. Because the reality is, I've been a music fan my whole life, dude. I've never, I can't think of one time in 34 years on this earth of being obsessed with music. Like, I didn't come into the world as a marketer or a business guy, but I've loved music from a very, very young age. I cannot think of a time where I gave much of a shit about an artist's first week sales or first month sales. Hell, I didn't even know about it. You don't even know about it. Fans don't know about that stuff, nor do they care about it.
Every time you fell in love with an album for a new artist for the first time, the album was old.
Yeah.
Every time. In fact, like, you have very few experiences of falling in love with an artist where the thing you fell in love with, the entryway, was not an old piece of media.
True.
That's how you discover artists, is you get turned on to something that is categorically old.
So with that, knowing that that's how the vast majority of artists are discovered, does it not make sense to arm yourself with as much opportunity and your fans as many chances to discover you by way of doing cool things in your marketing with the product that you just released, or you released 3 months ago, or you released 6 months ago, or you released a year ago? Find new and interesting ways to continue to market it, because the fans that are coming into your world, the new people, the new customers, that's the only shot. That's their in. That's the shot that they've got. That's the doorway. You need to decorate it. Put a wreath on it or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to say something about switching costs, and I also want to say something about what you just said regarding having a plan for different variants of what you're going to do to freshen up your offer after the release. But first, I do want to double click on, like, I haven't really, this is like kind of like, I'm thinking about it as I said it. It's like kind of a new way of saying it, but to me, but almost never did you become a fan of someone because they released a new album. You ever think about that? Like,
that's what I'm saying. Yes.
Almost never has that happened. Like, it's actually like you putting out a record is not a solution to, I need to freshen things up and get new people paying attention. Just by definition, like that's not really how it happens. I didn't discover System of a Down because they put out a new record. You know what I mean? I didn't discover like Project Pat because he put out a new record.
Yeah.
I discovered these things downstream of new records. So just to say that, like, that's worth considering. Switching costs. Bruce Lee said, I'm not afraid of the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks once. I am afraid of the man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times. And going back to my analogy of, I would rather see you put out one record and promote it for 10 years than put out 10 records and promote each for 1 year. The reason is that there's switching costs. One record over 10 years has economies of scale. Every lesson you ever learn about selling that record or describing it or creating media to promote it or figuring out the right way to create content to make people aware of the songs to then discover the record, that all builds. You don't have to learn that twice. You don't have to discover that twice. You don't have to go through the pain of failing to discover or learn it twice. You go through it once, and then you have that as a gain, and these gains accumulate. If you put out a new record every time you think mistakenly that something has gotten old, you now have to re-incur the cost of production, the cost of distribution, the cost of creating associated media, the cost of putting it out, the cost of learning how to make content that resonates with people for these specific types of songs, the cost of building up goodwill and acumen around the record. There's so much that you lose page one when you decide to put out a new thing that you don't lose if you just continue promoting the thing you already put out. So that's switching costs. That's like, it makes more sense just from a raw mechanics perspective to continue promoting the one thing.
To add weight to that, and you and I have talked about this before, is music and artists, we've naturally somehow manufactured the launch problem that a lot of businesses in like online spaces deal with, versus companies that sell their product over and over and over again to customers, new customers, or customers that come back for something else.
Yeah.
Artists have recreated the launch problem.
The boom bust. Yeah. The launch roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah, they've boxed themselves into it, and this episode is your permission to get yourself out of it.
Yeah, totally. So Jack was talking about how like maybe one way to counterbalance your feeling that something is going stale or the downstream effects of continuing to promote something is to come up with different variants for the offer to then like pivot to after you've put it out and some time has passed. But I do want to reiterate here that like Jack and I both personally know marketers who have sold tens of millions of units without ever freshening up their offer. Because to them, there's always a new customer to get. There's always a new person to sell their thing to. There's 8 billion plus people in the world. So it makes no sense whatsoever to feel as if you have to freshen up an offer. Unless you're in like a hyper niche, like you serve North Carolinian dentists. Okay, well, there's a finite amount of those, sure. You need a new offer. But like insofar as you serve a broad general audience, and I don't care, I don't mean hyper niche like music genre either, because like, dude,
That's still broad.
that's still very broad.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like no matter how niche you are, still very broad. So just to say that like, if you're not like a household name, you actually don't need to freshen up your offer. You only need to freshen up your offer to resell the same thing to people who have already bought it, right? Like, or if you experience like promotional fatigue, which it can happen, it's very unlikely to happen to you as an artist. It will almost never happen. And you'll know when it happens because you'll have spent literally millions of dollars in marketing. It's not a concern you need to have locally. And so I would behoove you, I would encourage you, I would entreat you to please just consider the prospect that you could put out a record and sell that record in the exact iteration that you had it to begin with for a decade, that you could sell 1 million units of it without ever really fundamentally changing what the offer is. And really what you need to iterate more than the offer itself, more than the packaging, is how you turn people on to it.
That's exactly where I was going to go with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a super great point.
It's a simple decision tree. Am I a household name world famous yet? No? Okay, I don't need to put out a new thing. Like you can if you want to, and artistically, like, of course we want to put out new things. We don't even want to finish like things that like are half finished.
Yeah, yeah.
Perennially tipped towards putting out new things by virtue of like we want to make new things. So I get that. And there's no one's saying don't do that. But in terms of like tentpole releases that are then codified as like physical products you can sell, and they have their own physical product line you can sell and all that, and all the hoopla and the pageantry of doing a release, you don't have to do that a whole lot. And certainly like you should never do that because you're not, unless like your music making has gotten like leaps and bounds better, you know, like maybe there's a case there. But you're much more likely to fool yourself into thinking that's the case rather than actually like identifying a need where you need to freshen things up. Really think about maybe the answer to all my problems is to stop fidgeting so much and to just take this thing I felt really strongly about at one point and just continue to try new things in terms of leading people to buying that thing. That could be new content. It could be new presentations of the singles in a record. It could be new platforms. It could be just new branding. It could be anything, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a new record or a new product.
Yeah.
Almost ever. Like you should know really, really precisely what the reasons you are invoking for making a new thing. And you should avoid making new things as a means of breaking the monotony from a sales perspective, freshening up an offer, overcoming fatigue. If you're not a household name yet, there is no fatigue. You literally have not shown it to people who would buy it yet. Like, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point because we could go so deep into what it means to change an offer. And sometimes, and what I was getting at initially when bringing up that point and that tactic is like, sometimes the only thing you need to do when changing, quote unquote, the offer is like, take that video that was working for you and make it black and white. You know, change the first sentence of your copy and you've got a new angle You've got a new approach to the offer, and nothing about the offer has actually changed at all. It's just slightly different ribbon on the packaging.
Open up another marketing channel.
Right.
Make more content.
Yeah.
These are all different avenues to sell the same product without changing the actual product you're selling at all.
It's really interesting because, like, as creatives, we definitely, the fidget or the itch to create is both our best friend and our worst enemy. It's our best friend in that it drives us to keep making art that's better and cooler and resonates more with ourselves and hopefully with the fans that you're, giving it to, the world that you're giving it to. But also it's our worst enemy in terms of business because, like, yeah, don't fidget so much.
Yeah.
Keep going with what you've got. We talked about Jay Abraham last episode. There's a book that you should read called Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got. It's an amazing book by Jay Abraham. And a lot of what we're talking about here today isn't necessarily directly from that book at all, but there's so many inferences to this concept in the principles that he teaches about business in that book. I'll link to it in the show notes. You guys can check it out. It's a really good book. I read it like at least every 2 or 3 years since I first read it, because it's one of those books that you come back to and you learn something new. But yeah, I think that there's so much that we've seen with our clients at the agency where these concepts apply, where it's just like, okay, like, it's almost like release happened. All right, time to really turn the marketing up, instead of like, where I often see artists struggle is, okay, release happened. Like, I've probably gotten the most out of this. Like, now it's going to float off into space untethered from the ship. And eventually, like, we'll just forget about how this record even happened and we'll do the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When I was a studio manager, I couldn't maybe contextualize it at the time as this, but it was a phenomena that I encountered tons, like all the time, which is that, like, artists typically turn unexplored space in the form of production, recording, and even packaging and getting it out. They'll explore that space because it's exciting and it doesn't invoke their identity necessarily. Like, it's just them and an engineer and their bandmates maybe, or some, collaborators, and that's it. And they don't have to really confront their identity in the context of the larger pantheon of music and people who listen to music. And they don't have to be critiqued. When they get to the point, like, they will do that multiple times over. They'll record singles, put them out, record albums, put them out. But when it comes to, when they finally leave that unexplored territory and get to the explored territory, get to the unexplored territory of actually promoting it and trying to gather attention and put it into the lexicon of music and put it into the mind of the public, they ditch out, dude. They're like, oh, I'm going to go back to the safe explored territory in the studio.
Bail. Yeah.
I'm going to bail. And I totally get why. Like, it's not hard to see why people wouldn't want to go through the pain of promoting it over years and putting themselves out there. That makes total sense. But you should be at least capable of becoming aware and gaining control over that tendency of yourself. Is like, just note how quickly it takes you to want to record something new after you're done producing a work. Like, it's very rapid. And it's probably, that's why. It's probably because you're entering a space and you have yet to settle. And it's a lot scarier than the first space was. The first space was exciting. You got to go into a recording studio, or you got to get all your friends to come over, and you were making stuff, or you were just tinkering away in your room and didn't have to deal with anyone else. And that's a lot more comfortable than stepping into this sort of vast chasm of, how do I become a fixture in the history of recorded music and gain a fan base?
I didn't think that we were going to get to that level of analysis of how to look at yourself as a creative and analyze, like, where is my mindset when it comes to where I'm steering the ship. But I think that's really what you just talked about there, is like, am I allowing my creative desires to capsize my opportunity as a business? And I think that's something that every artist should look at themselves hard in the mirror at, especially when it comes time for a release season. I want to give one last tactical bit of advice. when it comes to how to analyze your release plans is, again, let's go back to the spectrum, the timeline of put your release in the middle of the timeline, draw out a ruler and say, what am I planning on the left side from a marketing perspective? And what am I planning after the release happens? And if you're lopsided towards the left, this is a super simple analysis for being like, okay, I need to shift my plans. And you don't have to look a year or 10 years or 5 years in advance of the marketing after the release. You don't have to know exactly what that's going to look like, but maybe plan out what the next quarter is going to look like or the next 2 quarters and decide from there, what do I need to shift? How do I need to keep fans excited? How do I need to make fans that weren't excited? How do I get new people into my world? These are all the things that you can do. And what's cool is you can springboard off of the momentum that you had in previous releases, in the pre-release phase of this new release. And you can use all of that in the marketing landscape in post-marketing. And you should. That's the really simple analysis that I would make for any artist that would ask me about this. So I hope you guys can use that as a very simple framework just to figure out if you're over-indexing in any direction and how to shift resources and ideas and creativity so that you can maximize it.
Yeah, it might even be a useful exercise to just look at what it would look like to make your line pre-marketing to post-marketing and then put your release as close to the pre-marketing end of the spectrum as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And just envision that this line is like the next 10 years. What are you going to do? At least to start to think about it. You don't have to have a rigid plan, but also pre-planning what your post-marketing is going to be might not be the only way to think about it. Because like you should plan what your first month, 2 months, even 6 months at post release is going to look like. But more importantly, you should prepare yourself for a discovery process. You are discovering how to market, how to promote specifically this record, but also in general. You are exploring unexplored territory of how do you bring this record into the conscious of hopefully millions of people, right? And then like really condition yourself on the success or staleness parameters of like, have I actually reached millions of people? At least reached, right? It doesn't mean that they responded, doesn't mean that they watched your video, doesn't mean that they bought a record, but did you at least reach millions of people? Because doing that is not that expensive anymore. And like, you could do that. If you've done that and there's just been no shimmer of progressive improvement, then like, sure, like, maybe you need a page 1 rewrite on what is the product and what your sound is. And sure, if they made leaps and bounds there, do it. But point being is that like, think in 10 years, not 1 month, for a thought experiment, and then think in habits and process, not events and plans. You can plan how you're going to attack the process and iterate on it. But it's more like a loop. It's like, I don't know what the next 10 years looks like. I know what the 3-month recurring loop looks like. I'm going to try something out, implement it, measure the results, do an analysis, post-mortem on it, figure out what worked, what didn't work, iterate, and then loop back around. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's just a way healthier mindset to be in. And then lastly, I'll leave you with like, not only do you not need to get famous and have everyone in the world love your record the month it comes out, okay? Not only do you not need to, but you probably won't. And that says nothing about what you should do thereafter or how successful you're going to be in 10 years. It says absolutely nothing about it. So get ready for that. Prepare yourself for that. Say like, I actually don't expect to have a big release. I actually don't expect to have some huge wave of attention just by virtue of the fact that I release a record, or I release an EP, or I release a single. What I expect is to now have an excuse to practice my loop, to practice my process and refine it over time. And the process is really the valuable thing. Like the album is just an excuse to make it better and a set of parameters to condition yourself around. That's what you should be thinking about. You should be excited about being able to practice that process, not necessarily about like how well this album's going to do in a specific time frame.
Yeah. Well said.
And then one more thing. When you dial in that process, you could get 100 fans in 6 years and then 1 million fans in 1 year.
Dude, that's the crazy thing.
That's the crazy part. Yeah. But like most people won't ever get there because they saw 10 fans in 1 month, 100 fans in 6 months, and thought this isn't worth it and it's flopped and everyone is tired of it, having reached only maybe 10,000 eyeballs total. And they're like, I need to make a new record because everyone's tired of this record.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone.
Yeah. Everyone in the world.
Everyone's tired of it. I hope this helps you guys. I hope this gives you an analysis for thinking about your marketing, for loading up your marketing, and gives you a bit of confidence to go forward beyond releases. It's been a minute since we've talked about this topic, so I'm glad we did.
This was good.
Yeah, I love it. Go market your records.
Please
go market your records. Hope you guys dug this. We'll catch you next time on Creative Juice. Peace out, Indies.
Can y'all really feel us? East Coast, feel us, West Coast.